Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt, and this is your mock exam review here for exam number 2 for logic. So, just real briefly, this is going to be an abbreviated video. We're going to cover a couple of truth tables, and I will leave you on your own for the translations. You have all of the answers available to you, but this is just to work a couple of the truth table problems, make sure that you understand validity, tautology, contingency, and self-contradictory groups of statements. So let's start at the beginning. I'm going to work one of the problems that we did not work in class. It's number 17 right here. The way that this goes is we have a conclusion, which is R wedge not S is true. And then we have two lines that support it. The first one is, it is not the case that K is equivalent to S. And the second premise we have, S implies not R wedge K. Now I'm going to sneak out here to the bigger view. Hold on. Boom, boom, boom. To where we're working here on the whiteboard. Let me get this going here. Okay, here we go. Okay, kablamo. See how easy that was? Okay. So, first thing that we do whenever we're trying to figure out, remember the instructions are going to say, determine whether the following symbolized arguments are valid or invalid by constructing a truth table for each. Be sure to indicate whether the argument is valid or not, and explain why by reference to the truth table. So, the way that this gets set up is always the same. Remember, we count the number of capital letters that we have in our sentences, and we put them over here. So I have K, I have R, and I have S. So I have 3 statements. The first thing I need to do is calculate how many rows I'm going to have. Well, if I have 3 statement letters, that's going to be 8 rows. Probably easiest just for you to memorize it, but if you need to know, it goes like this. N is the number of statements that you have. In this case, we have 3 statements, right? So 3 statement letters. And so I'm going to take N and I'm going to put it as the power for 2. So 2 to the N is going to be 2 to the third, which is going to be equal to 2 times 2 times 2, which is 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is equal to 8. So we're going to have 8 rows right here. 4 of those rows will start off as true, 4 will start off as false, and then when we move to R, we're going to have 2 true, 2 false, and then when we move to S, we'll just alternate TF, TF, TF. What this does is it shows us all the possible combinations under which these sentences can be true or false. And then that will allow us to determine all the circumstances under which the premises are true. And then we can look and see whether or not, when those premises are true, they guarantee the conclusion over here. This is going to take me a long time to write out, so what I'm probably going to do is just speed it up real quick for you guys. So I'll either edit out my writing or I will speed it up as you work. So here we go. I have my K here. I'm going to have 8 rows, 4 of which will be true. So I'm going to go true, 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 true. Then I'm going to go false, 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 false. Okay, I'm done. This is it. And I'm going to now move over one, and I'm going to go true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. Go over one more. True, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. Okay, there we go. Now, it's just going to be a matter of filling in each one of these individual columns. So I'm going to start doing that now. Remember to be methodical. Don't rush. When you rush, like I do, it's easier to make a mistake. And if you're comfortable doing this, you're even more likely to make a mistake. So here we go. I'm going to go T, F, T, F, T, F, T, F. All right, and now I'm going to move each one of these over. This is a lot of work. So we go T, F, T, F, Okay, and then we have R over here, so I'm going to go T, T, F, F, T, T, F, F. Okay, now I have K right over here. That's 4 T's, 4 F's. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and now over here. Here we go. We're going to do our R's. So that's T, T, F, F, T, T, F, F. Oops. I want to try and line everything up perfectly so that it makes sense when I look at it at the end. You guys have lined paper, so you'll be okay, but this gets a little dicey. And then the F's are just alternating. All right, let's just make sure that we're looking good here. The S's alternate, TF, 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 TF. Yeah, okay, the K's are 4, so 4, 4, 4, 4. S's alternate. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, looks like we're good. So now I'm going to work inside the bag. I'm going to look for individually negated statement letters first. I see one right over here, not S, so I'm going to do my conclusion first. You can do it in any order, but this way is just a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and rock it. Here we go. This goes. And you know what I'll do? I'll change colors. Let's see how this purple looks. Yeah, this'll do. Yeah, let's go with it. Here we go. F, T, F, F, T, F, T. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm going to finish this up. I'm going to look under the wedge. So, remember the wedge is very strong. Fuerte con la fuerza, right? Strong with force. And what that means is, it's that both sides of this disjunct have to be false in order to make the whole thing false. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to find my false first. I'm going to write those in, and then everything else will be true. It's a shortcut, but it's a shortcut that actually makes you more accurate rather than less. At least in my case, that's true. So here we go. False, false. So remember, I'm comparing this column that I just finished to the column that I moved over from R. So we have T, so that's false, false, that's false, 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 that's false. FT, that doesn't matter. So I have a false here on this row, the 7th row, and the 3rd one. And I'm going to just put in T for all the rest of them. All right? And I leave a little note there to myself. Hey, that's where I finished last. Okay. So now I'm going to work inside the bag. Here we go. I'm under the triple bar. And remember, the triple bar is a fancy way of saying these two statements are the same. They are equivalent. And so remember, if two statements are equivalent, they're going to be true and false under the same conditions. And so here, I'm going to look for either a TT or an FF. If I find it, I know those statements are equivalent because they're true and false under the same conditions. They mean the same thing. If I don't find that, if I find a TF or I find an FT, I'm going to write false because it's not true that they're equivalent. It's false that they're equivalent. So here we go. All right, these two are equivalent, so we're fine. That's true. These two are not equivalent. These two are equivalent. These two are not equivalent. These two are not equivalent. These two are equivalent. These two are not, and these two are. I leave a little note here for myself. And I'm going to apply the negation to this middle column right here. So here we go. I'm going to take a true statement and make it false, or a false statement and make it true. And then I'm just going to repeat that as I go down. True makes it false, false makes it true, false makes it true, true makes false, false makes true, and true makes false. Okay, and then I just leave a little note here to myself so that whenever I come back to compare the premises, I'll be able to do so in a pretty straightforward way because I remember what my last column was. If you have forgotten what the last column is, it's going to be the main operator. right? The operator that has everything else in its scope. So the negation has the whole statement in its scope. Over here, the wedge is the main operator because it has everything else in its scope, right? R wedge, not S. This is a disjunct. So, all right, we're going to keep moving. I'm going to continue to work inside the bag here on my premise. I only have one premise left to go. So, I'm going to evaluate this under the wedge. Remember, with the wedge, both sides have to be false in order for it to be false. So I'm just going to move through here. There's a false. There's a false. These will be true. These will be true, and these will be true. So I write true, 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 true. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm going to apply the negation function to this disjunct. If it's a true statement, it will make it false. True statement makes it false. True statement makes it false. Makes it false. False statement makes it true. False statement makes it true. So all I'm doing here is I'm saying, look, this negation applies to all of this. And what this sentence says is, look, it is not the case that this disjunct is going to be true. So if it is true, I make it false. And if it's false, then I make it true. All right, I'm not done yet, though. I still have one more row to go. I'm going to need to compare this column to this column underneath the horseshoe operator. And remember, with the horseshoe, there's only one case that we want to know. The one case where the horseshoe is false is where the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. When that is the case, the whole sentence is false. So here, I'm looking for TF. If I find it, I write false. If I don't find it, I leave it blank, and I'm going to write in true later. True, 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 and true. All right, so this is a little sloppy here, but you can see this is my column right here. It kind of runs. It's a little bit crooked, but that's okay. We got to give Professor Vitt a break, right? Now, for my last bit. Now, I filled everything in. It looks like we're all the way home, but we may not be, right? We need to finish the last part of this request. In other words, we need to determine whether or not the argument is valid or not by reference to the truth table. So you may feel like you're close, but you're not. Now, what we want to look for is validity. And all that means is that if these premises are true, if the reasons are really good and they're true, then they're going to guarantee the conclusion, right? So what I want to try to find is true, true, false. And here's why. If I can find one row where these premises are true and this conclusion is false, then the truth of these premises do not guarantee the truth of the conclusion, and the argument by definition is not valid. So I'm going to walk through my premises and I'm going to look for true, true, false. If I find it, I'm going to stop and circle and I'm going to say, hey, this argument is not valid because there's a row on which the premises are true and the conclusion is false. If I don't find a case where I have TTF, then the argument is valid, and I'm going to explain by reference to the truth table why the argument is valid. In other words, I'm going to say this argument is not valid because there is no row on which the premises are true and the conclusion is false. You may be inclined to stop and not do the reference and finish it up, but I beg you to do so because that's really the point of the problem, right? And I'm limited in the points I can award unless you finish it up. So let's go for it. I'm looking for true, true, false. First premise here is false, so I don't care. I move down one more. True premise, and true conclusion, right? So I'm comparing this one, and this one, right? And here I have true, true, true. All right, now, here I have false, I don't care. Here's true, true, true. Okay, that's fine. True, false, I don't care. False premise, don't care. True statement, and false conclusion right here. This is it. So this seventh row was the troublemaker, right? Look, this demonstrates that this argument isn't valid. Here's how. If this premise is true and this premise is true, the conclusion remains false. In other words, the truth of the premises doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion, so that means that this argument is not valid. Okay, and then we write because there is a row on which I'm going to have to get down here. The premises are true and the conclusion is false. Okay, it's not valid. You're almost completely done. This would be an A, right? If you want to go a little bit further, because it's not a valid argument, maybe that depresses you a little bit. It depresses me. I had high hopes for this argument. I really wanted it to work out. It didn't, so I'm just going to express my sorrow with a sad face. There you go. That is problem number 17. Okay, you guys, and now the other kind of problem that you're going to have on the exam is the type of problem where you use a truth table to determine whether a statement can be classified as tautologous, self-contradictory, or contingent. And so these are all properties that sentences can have. Just a quick review, a tautology, that one right there, tautology, will mean that all of your rows under the main operator are going to be T, or the column under the main operator, which is going to be right here, will be all T's. A self-contradictory statement is the opposite of that. A self-contradictory statement is when the column underneath the main operator is all false. In other words, it doesn't matter what the words mean, the sentence is always false. In this other one here, it doesn't matter what the words mean because the sentence is always true, right? There's one last categorization, and that's called contingent, right? And remember, a contingent statement will be one that's not a tautology and not a self-contradiction, or to put it a better way, it has at least one true underneath the main column, and it has at least one F. Okay, so those are our three options. I'm gonna fill this out now. If you need to fast forward, please do so. It's just gonna be me writing this up there. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. G comes first. I have two statement letters, two capital letters, and so two letters is 2 to the n, where n is equal to the number of letters. So 2 to the 2, so that's 2 times 2, so that's 4. So we're going to have 4 rows here. So we're going to have 2 true, and we're going to have 2 false. Moving over, I'm going to take the 2 true. Remember the Dalai Lama's butter, right? If I have 2, I'm going to cut it in half, and that's going to then make it 1 right here. Okay. Where's mine? Here we go. All right. So now I'm going to go through this process. Remember, make sure you do this part right. Often, if I make a mistake here, the whole thing ends up wrong. So do your best to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I'm going to bring over my G's. Here we go. I have true, true, false, false. Now I have N, true, false, true, false. Then I have G, true, true, false, false. Nailed it! Keep moving. Here we go. N is true, false, true, false. And then G is going to be T, T, F, F. And then N wedge G over here. I'm going to move these over. So my N's are T, F, T, F. And my G, T, T, F, F. Okay, we did it. Now I need to engage here inside the bag. I'm going to start inside the bag, meaning inside the parentheses, and I'm going to look for an individually negated letter first. So here's one right here. Boom, not G. So I'm going to fill that in first. It's going to make it, the negation function just flips the truth value of the statement. So if the statement is true, it makes it false. And if the statement is false, it makes it true. And you know what? I should probably use a different color. Let me see if my red will do it. Yeah. All right, let's do this in red. I'll just do the rest of it in red. I'm not going to erase it and redo it. Okay, so I filled in everything. Now what I want to do is finish up. So I'm going to keep working inside the bag here, right? I'm looking at the horseshoe. The horseshoe is going to be false in this one case right here, where the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. In every other case, it's going to be true. Now, be careful. Notice that I'm doing this column here, not this one. I'm doing the negated G, not the G. If I made a mistake there, then this would be false, and that would throw off my answer probably. So I'm going to keep this just like this, and now I'm moving outside of the bag, right? And I'm going to compare this row here to the row I just finished, because this is all part of a box, right? The bracket is like a big box. So we're going to go in here, and I'm going to compare this column to this column. I'm going to look for this case where I have true implies false. Remember, that's the LeBron James case. Every other case, this is going to be true. Okay, I'm going to leave a little mark here for myself so that I remember what the last column that I just did was. I'm going to start working on this side over here and see how it goes. All right, working inside the bag. Here we go. It's a wedge. It's just a very, very strong wedge. Remember, the wedge is strong, which means there's only one case where it's false. Both sides of the wedge have to be false in order to make the entire disjunct false. That's what I've got. Every other case, boom, it's true. Okay, let's work inside the bag over here. Remember, this is a triple bar. Triple bar just means equivalent. It means they're the same. So if the truth values are the same, meaning they're both true or they're both false, then it's true that they're equivalent. If they're not the same, then it's going to be false that they're equivalent. So here's one, true, true. That's fine, they're equivalent. Here's one here where they're equivalent, so that's true. The other cases, it's false that they're equivalent. Okay? Now, I'm going to compare what I just finished here in this column to this column. So, true and true is true. False and true is false. False and true is false. True and false is false. Remember, the dot is very delicate. The conjunction is delicate, and the only way it can be true is if both sides of the conjunct are true. Every other case is going to be false. All right, so this was the last one that I finished right here. I'm going to wipe out these other marks for myself. And I'm going to compare this here to this over here. I'm going to do so underneath the dot. We just refreshed that rule, but under the dot we're looking for false, false. We're looking for true, true. Because the dot is very weak, we want to find the instances where both sides are true, and we'll write a T. If we don't find any of those, every one of them is false. Let's take a peek. F and T, that's false. Right? If I have one false, then the whole thing's false. T and F, that's false. T and F, that's false. T and F, that's false. Okay, now, what you do when you're finishing these up, remember these are different than the arguments. Here, you're going to circle the last column you did under the main operator, and then you're going to classify it, right? These are all false, so this is going to be self-contradictory. So you're going to write self-contradictory because all values are false. You don't have to put this part up there. You can just write self-contradictory and you're fine. You don't need to. I will be able to establish that I can map it from there to there. I get it, right? You don't need to do anything further. Okay, so those are the truth table ones. Really the principal rule when you're doing the truth table in the exam, just make sure that you bring over your columns properly. At this point, it should be kind of tedious to you. If it's not tedious to you, and you're still learning how to do this, You can make it, you can do it, but you need to be disciplined. I encourage you when you're working, if you are cramming, I encourage you to work no more than 1 hour at a time. So if you feel like you have 3 hours to study for this and it's all at once and this is all you can do, don't study for 3 hours straight. You probably should not be studying for any more than 45 minutes at a time, and then take a break for 10 or 15 minutes. Get up, walk around, don't play a video game, don't surf the internet. Those breaks in between studying shouldn't be exciting your brain. They should be working another part of you, right? You should be getting up, walking around a little bit, have a cup of tea, dance to a song, and then go back to your studying. Okay, that's because it gives your brain a break, and it allows it to refresh. It's easier to concentrate longer that way. Okay, you guys, I hope that is helpful. And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Good luck on the exam.